This video is about the shockingly, extremely Christian roots of basketball and the fascinating and crucial statement it makes about Christians playing sports and just living life in general. The inventor of basketball, James Naismith, was born in 1861 in Almonte, Canada. As a child, he played a game called Duck on a Rock, where he and his friends would try to knock a rock off of a boulder with other rocks. The catch was that someone would stand in front of the boulder to guard it by swatting away the onslaught of incoming rocks. Naismith noticed that high lobs with arc were far more effective than just hurling the rocks with sheer force. I don't know, personally I would think otherwise. I mean, if a bunch of people are just absolutely launching rocks at this guy, I don't think he's going to be able to guard effectively for very long. At the age of 22, Naismith started attending school at McGill University, and he eventually earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Physical Education. Naismith was quite a talented athlete himself, representing McGill in football, rugby, soccer, and even winning medals as a gymnast. In 1890, Naismith got a theological master's degree from Presbyterian Theological College in Montreal. Naismith thought that he could be a better example of the Christian life through the arena of sports rather than through being a preacher. He became the physical education instructor at the YMCA International Training School for Christian Workers. His life vision was to win men for the master through the gym. During the winter months, having enough indoor gym games to keep the bored young men from fighting was a challenge. Naismith's boss, Luther Gulick, OG name by the way, my goodness. If my future wife is listening to this, then yes, Luther Gulick being the name of our first child is in fact a deal breaker. Anyway, Luther Gulick charged Naismith to come up with a good gym game that would keep the athletes in shape and, keep them from hitting each other with blunt objects and that sort of thing. Naismith tried creating indoor versions of outdoor games. Indoor soccer, indoor football, indoor rugby, that kind of thing. Naismith eventually tried a game that had a good combination of running and passing and no tackling or physical violence. Most physical contact in other sports happens when people are running with the ball. So Naismith decided that passing was the only thing allowed. This game turned out to be heavily inspired by the Duck on a Rock game that he played as a child. He made the nets high up, so there wasn't an absolute massacre in front of the net as people try to glom and gather to either score points or stop points, kind of like in hockey. He also pointed them straight up to encourage the skill aspect of the game and discourage the roughness that would ensue if everyone was constantly trying to Cy Young a large basketball in an enclosed 94 by 50 space with 9 other dudes standing around. Just seems like a recipe for disaster, you know? They started with a soccer ball and 2 peach baskets and they were off to the races. The game itself turned out to be much more violent than Naismith had hoped for. And so came the concept of needing to dribble the ball and not knock each other unconscious. I'm not exaggerating either. Before the dribbling thing, there was a ton of tackling, kicking, punching, which frequently culminated in dog piles in the middle of the floor. The results were reminiscent of the final game in Space Jam. Black eyes, a separated shoulder, and yup, someone got their lights knocked out. OG Luther Gulick wasn't kidding when he told Naismith that these kids needed a gym game stat or none of them would be alive by springtime. While this history is interesting, I mainly created this video to highlight Naismith's philosophy of sports. Naismith and Gulick especially prioritized the growth of the entire person, in mind, body, and spirit. This is actually the meaning behind the YMCA emblem. Gulick was quoted as saying, "Christ's kingdom should include the athletic world." About basketball, he said, "The game must be kept clean. It is a perfect outrage for an institution that stands for Christian work in the community to tolerate not merely ungentlemanly treatment of guests, but slugging and that which violates the elementary principles of morals. Excuse for the rest of the year any player who is not clean in his play." The associate professor of religious studies at the University of Kansas, where Naismith founded the basketball program, said of Naismith, his approach was to put Christianity out there in front of people and try to influence them through positive character development, but he reserved his formal preaching for when he was a guest minister at area churches. Naismith cared about reaching people through the promotion of Christian values in hopes that this would draw them into digging deeper into the truth of Christianity. In the area of sports, he informally preached all the time. He just didn't want to formally preach in that area because he felt that the testimony of his life and work had the potential to draw more people in over a long period of time. YMCA started involving basketball in its mission trips, and many young people were saved through these. China actually got its start in basketball early on because of these missionaries bringing a ball and a Bible. YMCAs would have local mission trips run by college kids where they would minister in inner city neighborhoods and rural areas. The main events of these trips would be musical entertainment and sporting events. Because they were providing these kids a service, a tangible good that they could enjoy and benefit from, they were also allowed and given the opportunity to give Christian teaching. Towards the end of his life, Naismith was quoted as saying, "Whenever I witness games in a church league, I feel that my vision, almost half a century ago, of the time when the church people would recognize the true value of athletics, has become a reality." See, Naismith's belief in the importance of sport in general is multifaceted. For one, he saw it as a great means of developing the entire person, mind, spirit, and body. Secondly, he saw it as another activity that could be done to the glory of God. The player can play disciplined and clean, exercising personal discipline and creating a great testimony for others in the process. Thirdly, he saw it as a great tool for breaking down social barriers and the awkwardness that follows, which can allow for an opportunity to share the gospel and Christian teaching. The surprisingly strong Christian background of basketball teaches and reminds us of a great life principle. We need to stop compartmentalizing our lives into either the sacred or the secular areas. In the sacred area, we put church commitment, any alone time we have with God, and that thing we always do before we eat without really thinking about it. And in the secular area goes everything else. If we're doing our math correctly here, most of the things on that list are going into the secular area. But that contradicts 1 Corinthians 10:31, which says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." Colossians 3:23 says to work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. Romans 12:1 tells us to be motivated by God's amazing mercy and offer our bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, as an act of worship. Galatians 2:20 says, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." Ephesians 5:16 tells us to use our time to walk wisely. The entire Christian life is supposed to be characterized entirely by walking daily by the power of the Spirit and not walking by the power of the flesh. We're commanded to walk by the Spirit, walk as children of the light, and walk in the same way that Jesus walked. Jesus certainly didn't compartmentalize everything into sacred and secular during his time on the earth. He used everything he came across as an example, teaching tool, and opportunity to glorify and do the will of his Father in heaven. This all points very strongly to the all-encompassing nature of the Christian life. We're told to do all for the glory of God, to sacrifice our entire lives, to live at all times by faith in the Son of God, to make the most of all time, to always walk by the Spirit, to always walk as children of the light, and to always walk as Jesus did. God doesn't ask us to give 10% of our energy, time, and attention to Him. He asks us to give everything to Him at all times. However, that doesn't mean living on welfare and never sleeping or eating so that you can always pray, read the Bible, and evangelize every single second of your life. That complete, all-encompassing sacrifice will play itself out differently depending on what you're doing. So yes, go to your job, but actively see it as an opportunity to work hard, grow as a person, give a good testimony to others, and reach your coworkers with the gospel. Do sports, but do it as an act of worship to God. See it as an opportunity to take care of your body as a temple. Enjoy it as one of God's many good gifts. See it as an opportunity to grow as a person in the areas of discipline and teamwork. These are two qualities that every Christian needs in abundance if they want to have an impact for the kingdom. Play with discipline, cleanness, and fairness, glorifying God by following the rules and acting justly. Create a strong Christian witness to non-believers in your godly attitude by always living your life in a way so that non-believers can't complain about it. The opposition shouldn't have to go complaining to the ref that you grabbed their jersey. Look at sports as an opportunity to bond and build unity with Christian brothers and sisters. And lastly, see it as a tool to break through social barriers and build strong bonds with non-believers so that you can do the most loving act possible, bringing someone to Christ and discipling them. Every action we perform on this earth is an opportunity to either reflect God's original design or to rebel against it. So nothing is secular or without God if you're actively choosing to reflect God's original intended design for His creation in everything you do. Choose wisely. And above all else, be gospel-driven in everything you do. Make your decisions based on Christ's sacrifice for you and how you can share about that sacrifice in life and in deed.